he would have us do a lot of stuff where we would do heralds where you kind of have like one hand tied behind your back. So we'd do like a dramatic herald or a backwards herald. And I was finding that really helpful because you stop worrying about
you're focused on this.
Things.
Right.
You're focused on the gimmick and there was a class where he had us do a bat, a herald in the dark. And he split us into two halves. And I was with the first half and we did one that was fine. Afterwards he was like, have any of you ever done that before? And we were like, no. And he's like, okay, well then that was pretty good.
Yeah.
And so the second half got up, and they did a scene painting opening, and I mean we both did. But in the second half, they somehow got onto a very like all the games were like homophobic.
Yeah.
And there was something where it was like a bar that was named like faggot or something like that.
Yeah.
And then they started doing when they started doing the scenes, one of the first beats was like two guys who were homophobic but wanted to go to this bar that was called Faggot. But they were also secretly gay but didn't want to admit it to each other. Right. And we're listening. We're in the dark, so it feels more intensified because it was like this sweaty room. And then in the second beats, their heightening of that was two guys who were going to the Jew killing store. And there's no laughter from anyone in the class at this point. And
of course not.
That's not a thing.
Right.
And then when they got into group game, there was a group game that had to do with like, because I think there was only one woman in the class. It was a very guy-heavy class. Yeah. And she was in this half of it. And in one of the group games, it was like they were playing a game where it was like she was like a girl in a classroom and she was presenting something and all the guys in the classroom were like, she's too fat, we can't see the chalkboard. So this is like the whole tone of this that was really like mean-spirited and none of these were like mean people. They were just going to...
Oh, I've been there. I think you get trapped into those like...
Yeah. Yep. And I think being in the dark, I think it also like did something. Like it made everyone like, oh, it's a forbidden herald or something. And then when they got to third beats, I will never forget this initiation from the third beats. One of the third beat initiations was mixing because one of the people who was in this half was Opus Mareshi.
Sure.
Okay. And he
current head writer
of the Colbert Report. He kept doing moves to try to like correct, because he's like if you know him, he's a really kind-hearted person. This is not his kind of comedy.
Right.
And he kept doing moves that were like, and pause. Okay, that's a videotape of the way not to treat people when they're doing class presentations. And then I remember the group immediately said,
I'm doing that.
We can't see the video. She's too fat. So they immediately were like de-correcting all of his.
Right.
And in the third beats, someone initiated a scene that was blending the obese girl student and the offensive stores, and it was the initiation was, welcome to the obese women rape factory.
Factory?
Factory. I guess it makes sense as a heightening of Jew killing store.
Right.
Thing that doesn't make sense with offensive thing.
Right. Yeah. It's a good like Mad Lib heightening.
And so in the third beats, they got to a final scene in the third beats, and someone says, I remember it was Opus's line in one of the scenes was, he goes, well, I guess there's some things you just can't teach. And then Curtis turned the light on and goes, don't I know it? And he walked across the room and he sat down, and then he goes, guys, that was awful. That was like I was trapped in a room with everybody I ever hated in high school, and they were making me listen to their bad improv. And then he like gave like a 45-minute lecture about where he said, let's talk about this, like why this didn't work. Like you can't just put nihilism up on the stage. Like he goes, you can do anything you want. I'm not here to tell you can't do something in an improv. Like I've done everything. I'll do anything in an improv scene, but there's got to be a reason for it. And it was like fascinating because like he like made them feel appropriately kind of like shamed for what they'd done. But by the end of the class, I feel like everybody had more of an understanding of like, you know, there's a little bit of like, I think because of my age, I was noticing a thing of like nice guys in the class who were funny, who were like, oh, these guys were like 8 when South Park came around.
Yeah.
And I'm like, their like baseline is like, oh, you can do jokes about anything.
Yeah.
Whereas I had a little bit of a different generational point of view on it, in the sense that like I know that South Park's supposed to be shocking, and that I feel like if I would seen it as a little kid, maybe I wouldn't think of it as shocking.
You're desensitized a little bit.
Yeah.
It's interesting to call it nihilism. Like that's a pretty sophisticated way to categorize that.
Yeah.
Nihilism, like to put all this kind of aim. It's not that it's hateful. It's empty, is what it is.
Yeah, because none of the
like
people in
he's
that
on a
class,
team with Anthony Tim, and like, he had probably just done his like 2-person mono scene where they're on the planes about to hit the World Trade Center.
Yeah.
Which is one of their mono scenes.
Yeah.
So he's certainly been thrown into offensive or dangerously territory that could be very offensive.
Right, and I think that speaks to his point that you can make, these
Yeah,
kind
it
of
sounds like an amazing
dangerous,
class.
risky, potentially offensive moves, or bring these kind of touchy subject matter and content things into improv. But as you related, there has to be a reason for it. It can't just be like.
And because none of the people in that class, like, they were all good people. It's not like anyone there was.
They weren't bullies.
I've talked to people who are in that class. Every time I meet up with someone or run into someone who's in that class, I always want to talk about that class. But it was just like they weren't thinking why. They were just thinking like, oh, I've seen people do scenes like this. I'll do a scene like this. So it was kind of almost like the way, like, as beginning improvisers, a lot of stuff you'll do. I've done stuff where it's like almost like a child imitating what you've seen someone do. Like, if you go and watch like Anthony Tamick or Shannon O'Neill or someone like that, there are things that they can get away with that not every improviser can get away with.
Yeah.
And it's partly because of some of it is, there's like a charm to certain improvisers have a charm that they can get away with more than others.
Totally. Yeah. And I did.
Yeah. No.
I was just going to say I did so many things early on as an improviser because I thought they were things that Besser would do. I would go see AssCat and I like idolized Matt Besser, and I would be like, just like I think it's a formative phase for everybody's improv development is like you see the people that you really like and are drawn to, and you think like, oh, yeah, I know how to do that.
Yeah.
And you don't realize until years later that you didn't know how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, but it was really, stuff like that. Those are the classes that I really remember where things. A lot of the lessons that make you get a little bit better are very painful when they're actually happening. Like I wasn't in that half, so I didn't have the direct experience of it.
Yeah.
But I was in a locked room with the lights off. So it felt intense to a degree that I might as well have been